Let's chat a little bit about NWSL. Preseason is in full swing. So there are still some signing updates that are happening. We saw a lot in the offseason for NWSL. We saw, the first ever free agency period. We saw, your typical trades, your typical, signings, acquiring players, international players. NWSL draft is a part of that as well. So what we're sort of seeing now in this preseason swing is a lot of the players who were either acquired or drafted. We're starting to get updates in terms of their official signings and their contract statuses with their new clubs now. Probably one of the bigger ones kind of coming out of the signings. I think we're going to take a look at Paige Monahan with Racing Louisville. They announced a multi-year deal with Monahan recently. And this was a player that they acquired on draft day via a trade with Gotham FC. But I think what's really interesting about this for me, Lisa, is Paige Monahan coming out of Gotham typically was utilized in the attacking front line on the East Coast side, but it appears that she's listed on preseason rosters as a defender, and apparently head coach Kim Bjorkgren says this is a defender. We're going to utilize her as a wingback. So any thoughts on this particular signing?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Of course I've got the thoughts. Even like, as you mentioned, it's the start of the preseason for all these NWSL teams, and we're seeing the clubs drop their preseason rosters, and sporadically they're dropping them. And that's where you really get to see which players are listed in what positions and for what reasons and things like that. And a lot of times we do see sometimes a shift between a forward and a defender and a front line and a back line and what we're going to see there. But I've been very interested in looking at teams' rosters and who is listed, who's not listed that I thought was going to be listed, who is listed as non-roster invites, meaning that they are free agents or unsigned players in the league that are looking to show up and make a roster, make a preseason roster and get signed to a contract. And there's a lot of them this year, a lot of non-roster invites on these rosters. But Paige Monahan signing with Racing Louisville as a defender. I mean, I see it. It's frequent that we see forwards then becoming defenders and having that switch happen. Hey, we saw it with Tyler Lucy in Angel City last year, and now Tyler Lucy at North Carolina, probably going to play in the back line. But when I look at what Racing Louisville has defenders-wise, like they just got Carson Pickett and Abby Erseg, and I'm just a little confused where Paige Monahan is going to fit into that lineup and where Kim Bjorkgren sees Monahan playing. That's the thing that confuses me the most, because I could see Monahan being a defender. I could see that. Even like she played wingback at moments for Gotham FC, and it was one of those players that could be a 1v1 defender, but can also whip crosses in. So it's so interesting to see how these rosters are fleshing out and what's going to happen. But getting a signing for a player like that is great. I mean, that's what you want to see, right? Get these players brought into camp, traded in, and immediately get them signed to a contract. That's what you want as a player for sure as well. And then we're starting to see it from some of the draft picks, right? That got drafted this year.
Yeah.
That was one of the craziest ones that I saw coming from Michelle Cooper in Kansas City, number 2 overall. We knew this was a team in Kansas City that wanted to do everything to get this player in Michelle Cooper, the sophomore out of Duke. They made a trade with Gotham to get that number 2 pick. And then they ended up signing Michelle Cooper early days of reporting to Kansas City. And I like this a lot, right? Like, I'm not surprised.
She didn't need long in preseason to leave an impression and to earn a contract with Kansas City Current. But I kind of want to stick with Racing Louisville a little bit when we're talking about their draft picks. I mean, they drafted Riley Parker out of Alabama, right? The runners-up in the NCAA championship. And Racing Louisville, well, yes, they're making moves and signing the players that they acquired through trades with somebody like Monahan, and apparently already the coaching staff is trying to rethink of ways to utilize the players in different positions. They're still making moves in terms of acquiring international pieces. And it's very intriguing to me because I feel like since Bjorkgren's arrival, that has sort of been one of these staples that we've seen out of Louisville. if they're gonna not do anything else, they're gonna sign international players, apparently, if you're racing Louisville. So we saw this, I think, already kind of mid-season last year, while Nadia Nadim has been with the team for a little while now. They also made a trade for, or not a trade, but they acquired Wang Shuang at Chinese International to join up with the team. And this year, in the offseason, they made a transfer with Tigres Femenil. So Nigerian international Uchenna Kanu from Tigres Femenil will now play in NWSL with Racing Louisville. But as part of that move, that also meant that they were going to send their draft pick, Riley Parker, on a loan to Tigres through June. So going to be, it wasn't exactly like, I wouldn't consider this maybe exactly like a player for player like swap at this point, but I thought it was a very interesting move. Not just that it was Louisville, but this concept that Liga MX Femenil is a place where a lot of these maybe first or second year players can go to and get professional experiences, and playing time. Minutes are a huge thing. It is very difficult. We know how difficult it is for draft picks to be selected by NWSL clubs and steal somebody's starting spot, essentially, and get those minutes.
They don't even have to be a first-round draft pick, but you look at someone like a Sarah Luber, right? This was a player that was came into the NWSL a few years ago with Chicago and ends up heading down to Mexico to play and got significant time there, grew as a player, and dominated it down there. She comes back to the NWSL, only plays for a couple of games, and it's like, I'm going back to Mexico. I had a better time there. I'm playing more. I'm competing more, and she's able to get up her touches. I agree completely that you have to look at the trade factor between Liga MX Femenil and NWSL. And I think that for someone like a Riley Parker, who is a forward and has been with Louisville and really has not seen enough time, this is massive for a player like Parker to get significant minutes, to be playing in a really top league with a top team through June. Massive. She's going to get a lot of experience down there. Maybe that's why Paige Monahan was signed as a forward, or signed as a defender, because they're just bringing in all these other players.
I love that. I'm excited. This is a move that really piques my interest. I would love to see more moves like this between NWSL and Liga MX Femenil. I just think it's very unique in the sense that it's a trade that involves an international player who happened to play in Liga MX Femenil. This isn't necessarily like a homegrown player from Tigres, who's a Mexican player who perhaps has ties to like the Mexican national team. That's not the case here. This is a Nigerian international who was also intrigued by the league, played in the league, found success with Tigres Femenil, and is now a part of the NWSL through a transfer between these two leagues. So I'm hopeful that this is maybe something a little bit groundbreaking in a sense, that maybe we could continue to see some more of this moving forward. But it's something that we'll have to keep an eye on, and I hope she finds success here in the NWSL. That's not the end of the moves there. There are still players that appear to be making some trades or acquisitions in an effort to sort of boost up their rosters as the regular season gets closer. Courtney Peterson involved in a trade. Orlando Pride trading Peterson to Houston Dash for up to $90,000 in allocation money. I believe that's pending certain conditions, and a 2024 third round draft pick. Early winner in this trade for you, Lisa?
Not yet. I mean, Courtney Peterson, a defender for Orlando, saw minutes last year, actually pretty consistent minutes with Orlando, but they also didn't have that much of a roster. Orlando was such a young team. I think this is a depth player for Sam Lady at Houston Dash at this point, with the roster that Sam Lady's really built up with at Houston and what can happen. This is a depth player that come World Cup time, when you're maybe missing a lot of players and you need some fresh legs, Courtney Peterson's going to add to that depth and maybe can like create a bit of competition across that back line for Houston to see kind of where she slots in. And I mean, who doesn't love competition, especially for an outside back role, right? That's where you want to have a lot of high competition because you want to be putting those players under a lot of pressure. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good get for Houston, right? You need depth, you need players to your roster, keep adding them in there for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think it's a pretty good depth signing for them. It's going to be interesting to see where Houston might utilize her, just because I think that they have mostly shored up parts of their back line already. But we'll see. More news with Orlando. Toni Pressley announcing her retirement, putting out kind of a nice farewell there. She's a local to Florida, so in her goodbye, sort of saying from beginning to end, and put a lot of nice photos of her time with the Pride there. I haven't seen anything too official on this quite yet from the player specifically, but Jody Taylor, we're going to bring her up because we saw San Diego Wave FC kind of issue a thank you, which could be perceived as a farewell on their social handles as well. So I think we'll just sort of try to pay attention to the next move for Jody Taylor as well, question mark and what that can mean. But Kansas City Current, it's just, we just keep talking about this team, Lisa, for some reason. I don't know why. Here's the why. If it's not signing Michelle Cooper, their number 2 draft pick overall, to a contract, they are still making moves. And perhaps it's in light of maybe some of the overall moves that they've already made. They just want to continue to keep adding pieces, as many as they can, in different areas on the pitch. But it was reported earlier and now officially confirmed by the club that they have signed and acquired Hanna Glas from Bayern Munich. So the Swedish fullback will join the team through 2024 with an option for 2025.
Massive signing for KC. This Kansas City is just dominating with their roster size, who they're able to get. We talked about them signing Michelle Cooper, number 2 draft pick, and now they pick up a defender in Glas that comes from Bayern Munich and playing at the top level, a Swedish international. This is a player that I believe she's 29 or 30 years old, so she's had a long career and a very successful career, and I think adding that level of veteran ability and the European style of soccer, right? Not only playing for Sweden, but in the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich will add a lot to Kansas City and to their depth. This is a player that's currently coming back from an injury, so not available right away for Kansas City. Won't be available to play yet, to train yet with the club. So it's definitely a long-term signing for a player like Glas. And as you mentioned, signing through 2024, an option for 2025. This is ambitious for Kansas City. The bulk of Kansas City's roster hasn't been small signings or small player signings that they're hoping to put together to build a solid foundation and grow this well. No, they are signing heavy hitters throughout this offseason, from free agents to trades to draft picks that they're getting, to then this signing from Glas out of Bayern Munich. I mean, I like this. I'm really excited to see how it unfolds and what happens. I also loved the announcement just because it happened this morning. Kansas City did a play on like swiping through oh my God, what is the app? What are those apps called where you're like dating? Yeah. No, because it's like a match thing.
Swipe right.
Yes, like a swipe right. Wow. Oh my God, I'm like a grandma. But that's what Kansas City did a little play on, and it was adorable. It was like all these different clubs that wanted Glas coming up, and she's swiping left on them saying, no, we're not going to trade there. I'm not going to trade there. And then Kansas City comes up. She swipes right. She gives them a heart. It's a match to Kansas City, and then she turns around and she's in the full kit. I thought it was super cute. I love that. I love creative stuff like that. Yeah.
I know what I love, Lisa. I love that you found your person because you're speaking like a true engaged woman planning a wedding. You're like, God, what are those? Oh, I love it so
Yes,
much.
swipe right. That's it.
Yeah. I love you. I love this move by Kansas City. Look, even with the maybe the added component of the fact that this player might not be available right away. Look, if you've watched, Glas, whether it's with Sweden or with Bayern, this is 100% a player, in my opinion, that as soon as she is up to fitness and ready to go, that is a starting 11 caliber player for Kansas City. So I think, unlike some other teams out there right now, Kansas City Current is not the only team that is, looking at their roster and has to account perhaps for players who might not be ready available through their season due to injury. And I think that Glas is going to be one of these players. Desiree Scott making the announcement recently that she will miss the start of the 2023 campaign due to a surgery that she had. And so this is another one of those players that we're talking about are probably going to get integrated later into the season. But because of all of the moves that the Current have made to this date in the offseason, you have to anticipate that they're not going to really struggle in terms of, especially in the midfield position, when you think of somebody like Desiree Scott and her absence, and you're like, oh no, what are we going to do without Desiree Scott? They made all of these signings to try to play around with it within their midfield. So it's interesting that in some of these moves, or maybe it's not too surprising for some folks, that in some of these signings that we're talking about, that Kansas City Current is dominating a big chunk of that conversation, because I feel like we've been chatting about them throughout the entire offseason.